Move wages, calendars, bosses, and weekends, and the human day does not become empty. It fills with food, fire, tools, children, movement, repair, teaching, and negotiation. So this thumbnail is literal. No job did not mean no work. But the famous claim that hunter-gatherers barely worked is also built on a counting trick. Count only hunting and gathering, and the week can look short. Count everything that kept people alive, and the answer changes. Jobs did not appear on one clean morning, so here the word means scheduled or contracted work exchanged for pay, rations, or market return. That arrangement is older than most people imagine. A clay tablet from Mesopotamia records harvest workers around 2037 BCE. Another from roughly 598 BCE records wage payments from a temple archive. So the title points farther back, before administrators could list workers and compensation. Work itself is vastly older than the paperwork around it. At Majid Bibi, researchers traced grinding stone use across roughly 65,000 years. The stones processed plants and pigments and helped manufacture or maintain tools. Those traces reveal tasks, but rarely the clock attached to them. Archaeology gives us outputs, not a prehistoric timesheet. That is why living foragers cannot simply fill the missing schedule for us. They are contemporary people with their own histories, neighbors, markets, and political pressures. Their environments also differ in rainfall, prey, plants, mobility, technology, and danger. Even hunters studied across 40 sites showed large differences between places and individuals. The researchers warned that one site is rarely a straightforward ancestral analog. Archaeological childhood evidence varies across continents, periods, and social settings too. So no group in this episode stands in for every human before farming. Instead, time budgets test what kinds of work arrangements are humanly possible. They can expose hidden categories that a narrow workweek erases. And they can show why a single hour total is dangerous. The single total became famous after the original affluent society argument. Early summaries suggested some hunter-gatherers spent only about 15 to 20 weekly hours getting food. That number challenged the older fantasy of non-stop starvation labor. Correction mattered, but the comparison was incomplete. David Kaplan's counter-review asked what had been counted as work. Hunting and gathering often made the ledger. Food preparation, tool repair, firewood, water, childcare, and camp movement often did not. A 40-hour paid job was being compared with only one slice of another life. Even leisure and work can blend when conversation carries knowledge or a trip gathers food. So we need at least two clocks. One clock measures direct subsistence acquisition. The other counts the wider labor that keeps people and relationships functioning. The Agta time budget study shows what the wider clock can see. Researchers observed 359 people across 10 camps in the northern Philippines. They recorded 10,706 activity snapshots during daylight hours. For 142 adults, out-of-camp work occupied 29.2% of observations. Domestic chores occupied 24%. Direct childcare occupied 12.2%. Leisure took the remaining 34.7%. Add the first three categories, and nearly 2/3 of observed daylight was not leisure. That is not a universal ancestral workday. It is one contemporary population, one method, and one period of observation. But it instantly breaks the picture of hunting followed by blank time. Food acquisition sat beside chores, care, rest, play, and social life. And 71.9% of recorded adult leisure occurred near at least one other person. Their downtime was often social space, not an empty calendar square. Now, switch back to the narrow subsistence clock. A science study compared human foragers and horticulturalists with other great apes. Cross-cultural estimates put hunter-gatherer subsistence near 4.5 hours per day. Horticulturalists averaged about 4.1, a statistically similar amount in that comparison. Humans nevertheless spent more energy acquiring food than the apes in the study. The advantage was speed of return, not laziness or effortless calories. Human strategies produced much more food per hour. They also depended on tools, planning, cooperation, and food sharing. Saved time could support social interaction and learning at central places, but processing and maintenance still happened after acquisition. A calorie brought to camp is not automatically cooked, divided, stored, or made safe. The 4.5-hour number is a food acquisition measure, not the whole human workload. Care and learning make the hidden workload impossible to ignore. A separate AgTA study followed care around 78 children younger than 7. Others did less direct childcare when other caregivers were involved. Children's playgroups consistently reduced the care mothers had to provide. That did not make care disappear. It redistributed care across fathers, relatives, unrelated people, grandparents, siblings, and other children. An archaeological review examined 86 publications about hunter-gatherer children in the past. The evidence included children's tools, playthings, flint knapping, marks, art, and footprints. Children were not merely waiting to become productive adults. They learned, practiced, played, carried knowledge, and sometimes changed the material record. A camp could be classroom, workshop, kitchen, nursery, and social network at once. Modern labels split those functions more cleanly than daily life necessarily did. Hunting makes the word work look deceptively simple too. Coster and colleagues assembled 23,747 hunting records. Sample covered more than 1,800 people at 40 sites. Statistical average hunter reached peak skill around age 33. At 18, the modeled average had already reached 89% of that peak. Skill stayed at or above that level until roughly age 56. But the average concealed major differences among sites and individuals. Some places peaked earlier, others later, and personal success varied widely. The dataset also contained too few female hunters for broad sex comparisons. So this is evidence for long skill development, not a universal male timetable. Food production combined strength, ecological memory, judgment, motivation, and learned technique. A life without a job title could still contain decades of specialization. Now put the broad work clock beside the narrow subsistence clock. Bowie and colleagues standardized 45,019 observations from 8 small-scale societies. Their work definition included food production, preparation, manufacture, housework, childcare, and commercial activity. It also counted some information acquisition because knowledge can support production. For men doing entirely non-commercial labor, the model estimated roughly 45 to 47 weekly hours. Moving toward entirely commercial labor was associated with another 10 to 15 hours. Women worked about as much as highly commercial men across the comparison. Their total did not rise detectably with market integration in the same way. That gender result matters because narrow hunting counts can hide work done nearer camp. The authors did not claim markets caused every extra hour. Their data were associative and motives could not be separated cleanly. Still, the counting lesson is brutal. 4.5 hours per day can describe subsistence acquisition. 45 weekly hours can describe a wider portfolio of necessary work. Those numbers differ because their questions differ, not because one dataset caught people lying. Even the shift toward farming or markets refuses a single neat rule. Among Agta camps, more non-foraging work predicted more out-of-camp work and less leisure. That pattern was driven largely by changes in women's time. Domestic chores did not significantly decline as outside work increased. In the broader energetics comparison, horticulturalists and foragers spent similar time acquiring food. Horticulturalists simply obtained higher returns per hour in that dataset. One study tracked total daylight categories inside one population. Another compared narrower subsistence costs across many populations. A third linked market participation with total work using a broader definition. Together, they show transitions rearranging work, intensifying some burdens, and changing who carries them. Here is what this evidence does not prove. It does not give prehistoric humanity one universal weekly schedule. It does not prove every forager enjoyed abundance, safety, equality, or free choice. It does not prove farming or markets made every person work more. It does not turn contemporary indigenous communities into museum exhibits of our ancestors. It does not assign hunting to men and care to women across all societies. It does not make socializing, teaching, or play economically useless. And it does not show that jobs ruined an otherwise effortless human life. Hours only become meaningful after we ask what observers counted and whose effort disappeared. So what did humans actually do before jobs existed? They managed a shifting portfolio of food, fire, tools, movement, shelter, care, learning, and relationships. Some tasks arrived in intense seasonal bursts, while others repeated quietly every day and across long nights. Rest could sit beside production, and conversation could carry technical knowledge. The day had no manager's grid, fixed shift, or payroll category, but it was not empty. No job did not mean no work. It meant work was distributed across survival, skill, and social life instead of one payroll category. Subscribe to Oddly Evident for more familiar stories rebuilt from what the evidence can actually support.